Well, I was trying to think of one particularly stressful time in my teaching career. And I know there was one whole year, about 6 years ago, where a lot of things just came together that made for a stressful year. On the home front, I know I was having some health issues with psoriasis, and that was kind of out of control. So physically, some discomfort and pain. And then my partner was doing a graduate degree at the time, so there was a lot of less time together at home, it seemed like at the time. And then the school year itself, there were quite a few things that sort of came together that year at the school. And I realize that some of what I'm saying is my perception of things. It may not all be exactly how things were, but it's certainly how I perceived them at the time. For example, we had a fairly recent administrative change, and that administrator to me, it could be difficult at times, and some of the decisions being made with the school and sort of seemed more managerial than leadership at times, and felt a little more micromanaged than usual. It was my 7th year of teaching at that point, and I was in an art department, and it became a tricky year because it seemed like the arts weren't as valued as they once were. For example, by April, we would still have students being taken out of other courses they weren't being successful in, and they'd be put into our art classes. And because it's only art and there's not really a curriculum to catch up on, seemed to be the pervasive attitude towards doing this. And those students couldn't be successful, and or rarely were, because we just couldn't get them caught up, and by then they were usually having enough other issues that the discipline wasn't the problem. It was other things going on in their lives. It's just why they were unsuccessful in other areas. And then I was having problems too with the department head that year. It was about just different ideas about how and when to teach what, and the idea of what supplies to order when, and sort of whose things were whose. So it was a challenging year for me. And that year I just thought I don't like what I'm doing. And I'd never done anything career-wise for 7 years in a row, so maybe it was just a point where I was looking for or needed a change, and these seemed like good reasons for me to find a change. And so at that point, I did make some decisions. The first one was to get out of that department for a while, so because I just didn't know how to resolve the issues in the department with my department head at the time. Later we were fine, we were friends, but for the next year I took an additional qualification course to be qualified in a different subject, and I became an acting department head in another area of the school in another subject for a whole year. So I had way less communication with the art department for that year, and things settled down and we got along better. And the year after that I did go back to the art department, and things were good. So it was also the last year I would teach in that school, because then with that headship experience I applied for and became an art department head at another school. So I moved on with good feelings with the art department, and we're still friends to this day. So other decisions I made, I started to question whether or not I wanted to be a teacher for a while there. I was 7 years in, and I thought I don't want to teach an environment where the arts are not respected or valued the way I think they ought to be. So I applied for and began studies in education for a PhD. So that was just another thing that I did. And in the health front, I joined a drug study that lasted for the past 5 years. So the health issues with the psoriasis, that was a non-issue as well. So in the end, there were a lot of changes, and I just needed to do something to get out of what was a stressful year that made me question whether or not I want to keep teaching. And after all said and done, I'm thrilled to be a teacher and an educator. So it all worked out in the end. All right, so now I've told you the story about a particularly stressful year I had in education about 6 years ago and how I dealt with it at the time. So now I'd like to just talk about what I sort of learned from that, or reflecting and looking back a few years later. What I learned from that is sometimes when you're working in the same spot with the same people for a long time, that you can lose perspective about why you're there and how you can deal with things. And if it's a small school or a small department, you could even lose perspective as the personal and the professional sort of meld together. So taking a year away from that department was good for me. And then a year later, going to another school was also very good for me and for my teaching. So I would, if it's even possible in your situation, sometimes a change is as good as a rest, and just going to try something new. And I know that's not always possible in a lot of scenarios, that it's not easy to transfer or switch schools or And for some people, it works well to be in the same classroom for 30 years. And for others, like me, I couldn't imagine that. So I do like change. So what advice would I have for people now? If they were in a situation similar to mine with a stressful year with the class composition and with their administrator and with their department head, is I would think about and look for the resources and ask what is available to help me. I didn't access the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, at the time. I did later for something else, for insomnia, and it was a good experience to actually use that. And it was available for free. And I know not in all boards is that a free service for all employees. For example, where I work, it's only available to permanent and probationary teachers. It's not available to occasional teachers, which is a shame. And I know that's different in other areas. As well, the teacher federations, what resources does your federation offer in terms of mediation, if that's the route you want to go, or advice, or professional development? My own federation has a mental health workshop available and a boundaries workshop, all kinds of resources available. And they have professional resources, professional development, a library, and people who can just listen or advise. Also, the federations here, they belong to Ontario Teachers Insurance Plan, and that's where they get their long-term disability programs. And as part of that, there's something similar to an EAP called Pause Action, which at the time I wasn't aware of anything like that. But it's also free counseling services available and confidential and accessed through your federation rather than through your employer if that's a concern for you, and I don't think it should be. And one other thing I would think of is, to me, I think of mental health. I wish we could approach it more like we approach something like dental health. And that sounds funny at first, but think about most people will take care of their dental health every day. They'll brush, they'll floss, they'll whatever. And they will go to a dentist, a professional, every 6 or 9 months and get checked by a professional to see what they can do. To me, it amazes me that we won't take the time to do that for our own mental health. So we'll spend more time worrying about our teeth than we do about our own mental health. What if we took 4 minutes a day to do whatever it takes to work on your mental health, whether it's just focusing on your breathing or meditation or a walk or whatever you want to do that works for you. And why can't we all go see a professional, whether it's a psychologist or another professional, a psych associate, a family doctor, whoever, to talk about your mental health at least once a year. So to me, in the perfect world, that would be something we should all consider, is why not focus as much on your mental health as you do on your other areas of your health? Because as I've learned, without mental health, there is no health.